The Jets have been much quieter in free agency than many people expected them to be this year. But through their signings, a very clear plan has appeared. And there are still some free agents available they could sign who fit that plan. We'll break this down and more today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, April 8th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, on today's show, we're going to look at some remaining free agents in the NFL who could make sense for the New York Jets. And the reason that they make sense for the New York Jets is that they fit a very specific plan that has come into focus based on the way the Jets have conducted themselves during free agency. So let's start by talking about what the Jets have done in free agency and what they have not done in free agency, because I'll be honest with you, I thought they would be more active. I'm sure you thought they would be more active. But in retrospect, I think I see what they've attempted to do. And this goes back to something we've spoken frequently about on this podcast. If you're an everydayer, I don't need to tell you that in many ways, 2025 is kind of a year where the Jets are resetting. After 2 years where they've gone all in with Aaron Rodgers, where they have thrown future resource after future resource into the present to try and build up around the future Hall of Fame quarterback, Aaron Rodgers is now gone. And we have a new head coach and a new general manager. And a new head coach and a new general manager typically means you're going to be longer term focused. And I want to be clear about this. That doesn't mean that you're just throwing away the season. There's always a balance. There are some teams that at extremes, like the Jets were at an extreme the last 2 years where they were solely focused on the present. There are also a handful of teams at the very bottom of the league that are solely focused on the future, that the here and now means nothing. These are the teams that sell off all their good players for draft picks. Most teams in the NFL, the vast majority of teams though, are somewhere between the two extremes, where they're trying to win in the present, but they still have an eye to the future. And you can be at varying points on this spectrum. There are some teams that are mostly focused now, but they still want to make sure they have resources to build something sustainable for the future. The Jets are closer to being focused on the future, but they still want to win right now. So what did the Jets do this offseason? Well, they signed guys who they felt could help them upgrade at priority positions. Obviously, quarterback's the most important position on the field, so they signed Justin Fields. And Aaron Glenn's defense, something we've talked a lot about. Jets are going to play a lot of man-to-man. They're going to blitz a lot. That means you got to have a strong man-to-man corner. Whether or not Brandon Stevens will be a strong man-to-man corner remains to be seen. But the Jets certainly think he can be a strong man-to-man corner, so they signed him, and they think they can coach him up. Safety is also a relatively important position, especially the deep safety, because when you're playing man-to-man, there's only one guy deep. There's one guy who has to patrol the middle of the field, and that's a guy you count on to produce turnovers. And they just brought in Cisco from the Jacksonville Jaguars to try and be that guy. And Cisco is kind of a bounce-back candidate, a rough 2024, but 2 good seasons before that. And a guy, if you watch him on the film, very good instincts. Very good instincts when we talk about patrolling that deep middle part of the field. Guy who's a bit of a ball hawk. 2022 and 2023, he had 7 combined interceptions across those 2 seasons. The Jets did not really do a whole lot else. And this goes back to what they did under Aaron Rodgers, because despite, only making 3 signings, and despite, not really addressing a lot of their core needs, this is still a Jets team that's relatively tight up against the cap. Overthecap.com estimates that they have just under $19 million in cap space, which is not all that much, because you have to consider that, they're going to have to sign their draft picks this year. They're going to have to sign practice squad players. The practice squad counts against the salary cap. Your practice squad players count against the cap. And then also, you need to have some money in reserve to sign players during the season, because inevitably you'll suffer injuries. Guys will have to go on IR. And when they go on IR, they no longer take a spot on the 53-man roster. You have to sign players to replace them. So you need to have some cap space in reserve. And I think the Jets are looking at this. They realize, you know what, we're not going to be a Super Bowl team this year. So let's be conservative with our money. Let's really focus on the long run. And this goes back, they just didn't have a lot of money to spend this offseason because of all the money they've pushed to the future. I mean, if you look at the Jets' current cap situation right now, I mean, this is a team that is going to end up with around, $60 million in dead money. That's $60 million in money that's going to guys who were not on the team this year. And that does not include about $40 million for Aaron Rodgers and CJ Mosley that's being pushed to the 2026 cap. So if you think about how tight the Jets could be up against the cap if they did not make Aaron Rodgers and CJ Mosley what are known as post-June 1st cuts. And being a post-June 1st cut essentially means you can spread the player's dead money hit out over 2 seasons. Jets are at $60 million despite pushing the majority of the Rodgers dead money and the majority of the Mosley dead money to future years. It shows you, it really, again, this is really a metric that shows you how much the Jets pushed to the here and now. $60 million in dead money. And, you have guys on that list, like, again, Rodgers and Mosley, but also Devontae Adams has dead money, Tyler Conklin, Mike Williams, Tyron Smith, DJ Reed, Javon Kinlaw, and then some other guys, Wes Schweitzer, even Hassan Reddick has a little bit of dead money, Solomon Thomas, and Izzy Abanikanda. Now, there's also another reason I think the Jets maybe sat out of free agency. And that is the team is actually now in position, according to overthecap.com, which is a great salary cap website. Jets are now in position, if they stay put, to land 3 compensatory draft picks in 2026. They're currently in line to receive a 4th round pick for Hassan Reddick, and then 7th round picks for both Tyler Conklin and Solomon Thomas, guys who departed in free agency. So Jets have a chance to add 3 extra draft picks. And I know these are day 3 picks, especially those 7th rounders. They're not worth that much, but it's an opportunity to add draft capital. And the Jets have sent a lot of draft capital out the door the last 2 years. The Hassan Reddick pick is especially valuable because the Jets sent out a 3rd round pick for Reddick and got absolutely nothing in return. And the 4th round pick, if they do end up getting this 4th round compensatory pick for Reddick, it's at the bottom of the 4th round. So odds are you've probably dropped about a round and a half. The 3rd round pick you gave up to Philadelphia, probably at best, is going to be a middle of the 3rd round pick, and you're dropping all the way to the end of the 4th round. For what you got for Reddick, that's a bad deal. But at least you're getting something in return. At least you're getting some sort of investment back. And if the more free agents you sign, the more picks you lose. Essentially, it's a 1-to-1. For every player you lose, if you sign a player, you lose that pick. You gain a pick for every player you lose a pick for every player you sign. So Jets right now are really focused on the future. If you're focused on the future, you value draft picks over short-term additions. However, the compensatory pick formula has a few caveats to it. One is that if you sign a player who was cut by another team, he doesn't factor into the formula. And there also is a cutoff after the draft. After a certain date, if you sign a player, they no longer factor into the compensatory pick formula. So once we get past the draft, there's a certain date on the calendar, and it's usually, sometimes it changes, it's different every year, but after that point, if you sign a player, you no longer lose a compensatory pick. And this could be an opportunity for the Jets to use what little cap space they have to try and improve their roster. And there are some really big needs. And I think there's one spot in particular the Jets are really going to have to address if they want this Justin Fields thing to work. Of course, the Jets signed Fields because they viewed him as a guy with upside. Well, if Justin Fields is going to work out, they got to get him some better pass catchers. And you're on the Locked On Jets podcast. There are some free agent pass catchers who are still on the market. Some big names, guys who may not be in their prime anymore, but guys who might be able to help the team in the right role. And we'll take a look at who some of the potential signings the Jets could make to help Justin Fields out are as we continue here on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Chewy. You've probably heard of Chewy. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet healthcare, Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. With over 100,000 products from all your favorite brands, Chewy has everything your pet needs, from food and treats to toys, beds, and grooming. And it's not just for dogs and cats. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. AutoShip is a game changer. You can set up automatic deliveries for food, treats, or any essentials so you never run out. You can easily change or cancel it anytime. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet healthy and happy. Right now, you can save $20 off your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the description. Save $20 $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes through the week, each day, Monday through Friday. We're talking about Jets free agency this year. We've discussed now what the plan is and why the Jets have pursued it. That said, I think there are some guys available in free agency who are still out there who could be logical signings for this team. I'd like to start by talking about the wide receiver position. And I think that this is a spot the Jets really need to upgrade. Now, there are a number of guys who are pretty big names who are available. I think you have to temper your expectations with them, though. I mean, these are guys who are clearly on the downside of their careers. These are guys who still don't, who are nowhere near what they used to be, but still guys I think could help the Jets. Now, we've talked a lot about Justin Fields, and Justin Fields is, a bit of a reclamation project. Jets are trying to kind of engineer a turnaround with him, with similar turnaround we've seen across the league with, former Jets quarterbacks, Geno Smith in Seattle. Now I know Geno is with the Raiders now, but his turnaround was with Seattle. Sam Darnold, who's now with Seattle, his turnaround was with the Minnesota Vikings. There are other quarterbacks across the league. I mean, Baker Mayfield kind of had a career resurgence after signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after an up and down 4 years with Tampa Bay and then a rough year in Carolina with the Panthers. Mayfield's established himself once again as a quality quarterback. You want to go back far enough, we could talk Ryan Tannehill, resurgence in Tennessee after leaving the Miami of Adam Gase. Lots of people get better after Adam Gase is no longer their coach. Jets are trying to kind of get Fields, a former first-round pick, a guy with a lot of ability, a guy whose top-end play has been quite good to produce at a higher level than he has through much of his career. And the Jets, didn't invest all that much in Fields, but they did give him $30 million guaranteed. And he's probably, the structure of his contract probably guarantees he's going to be here 2 years. So it's not like they've committed to him for a long time, but they've kind of suggested that they like him enough to lean towards keeping him for a second year, sight unseen. But if this is going to work, you've got to put good receivers around him. Now, the good thing is that the Jets do start with an excellent number one receiver in Garrett Wilson, not just a number one receiver who already has pre-existing chemistry with Fields. Fields and Wilson played together at Ohio State. Garrett Wilson reportedly was very unhappy near the end of last season because he felt like Aaron Rodgers was throwing the ball to Devontae Adams. The Jets got Adams during the season, and of course, he and Rodgers had a lot of pre-existing chemistry. Well, now Wilson has his own quarterback he's got chemistry with. But Jets need to get him help otherwise, because right now, if you look at the way things shake out, I think Allen Lazard's the number two receiver. I mean, I guess you could argue Josh Reynolds, but that's not inspiring. I don't think Tyler Johnson's anything more than a depth player. And look, I was intrigued by Tyler Johnson a few years back when he came out of Minnesota, but I mean, I think he's proven he's nothing more than a depth player. And here's the interesting thing about Lazard. If the Jets cut him, they save over $6 million. And when I look at the situation, I see if there's a veteran available who you can get for $6 million or less, you can make an argument he almost pays for himself, because Lazard saves you $6 million. So if you get someone better in here, you get anybody better in here, then you can just cut Lazard. Now, what you might say is, well, why don't the Jets just draft Ted McMillan at 7, who was the wide receiver prospect out of Arizona, widely viewed as the top wide receiver prospect in this year's draft class. And of course, that's an option, but you never want to go into the draft feeling like you absolutely have to draft a particular prospect. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, you don't know whether that prospect's going to get to you. It's possible somebody drafts Ted McMillan before the Jets are up. What would they do then? You also want to be open to other possibilities coming into play. I mean, there might be a better prospect than Ted McMillan available when the Jets pick. There might be somebody you're not expecting to fall who falls to you at 7. If you take that guy, then you might be in trouble at wide receiver if you don't do anything else. If you draft Ted McMillan over a prospect who's better than him, you're probably going to look back on that with some degree of regret. You never want to go into the draft absolutely needing to draft at a position. You want to go in saying, you know what, we can live with, we want an upgrade here, but we can live with what we got if the cards don't fall into place. So who are some of the some of the receivers available who the Jets could potentially sign? Again, there are a number of big name veterans out there, and these guys are all close to the end of their careers. And none of them are close to their prime production. And I don't know that any of these guys are going to be able to beat tight man coverage consistently, but these are professional receivers. They know how to run routes. They know how to read coverages and get into the soft spot in the zone. These are the types of things the Jets can use because Lazard can't do that. Xavier Gibson's shown no ability to do that. Malachi Corley is just a total, a total wild card. You're just hoping for good things with Malachi Corley, but you certainly can't count on good things for Malachi Corley because he's purely a developmental prospect. And then you have veterans like Reynolds and Johnson who, may be good locker room guys, but haven't shown a whole lot in their careers. Now, I think the top guy, the reason he's the top guy is he's the youngest guy in this mix. And there's actually like some reason to think he could bounce back. That would be Amari Cooper, who frankly the Jets should have traded for when he was available on the trade market 3 years ago when the Dallas Cowboys gave him away to Cleveland for a 5th round pick. And I think the Jets would have been much better off the last couple of years with Cooper. Cooper's coming off a bad season, but unlike the other guys, he just turned 30. So he's not in his mid-30s like the other two guys I'm going to mention. So there's reason to believe he's younger, so maybe he can bounce back. The other aspect of this is he's coming off a down year, but perhaps, not guaranteed, but perhaps there were some mitigating circumstances. Number one, he started the year on a Cleveland team that was just another mess. Cleveland had, I talked about a lot of these teams last year, the Jets, Jacksonville, Cleveland's another one, where the situation was just such a chaotic mess that you don't really know what to read into somebody having a bad year. Maybe they were just kind of like caught in the wave of dysfunction. Then he was traded to Buffalo, who obviously was a contender, went to the AFC Championship game, a tough loss to the Kansas City Chiefs in that championship game. So you could say, well, why didn't he produce when he had Josh Allen as a quarterback? And it's a fair point. And it's possible that Cooper is just in total decline. I mean, I think that there's a reason he's still available right now. But, it's also possible that, mid-season trades are tough. It's tough to get on the same page with your new team. You're in a new system. You've got a new quarterback throwing you the ball. You didn't have training camp to get on the same page with them. I mean, we've seen this. We even saw this a little bit with the Jets, the last couple of years. That sometimes it takes a quarterback and a receiver a while to get on the same page. So, is it possible that maybe there's still something left in the tank for Cooper? It depends on what the price is. The fact he's still available right now shows that there's not that robust of a market for him. If he could be had for around what the Jets would save by cutting Lazard, it might be worth it. And then there are a couple of guys who are older, two guys, Keenan Allen and Tyler Lockett, both have had long and productive careers and really showing signs of slowing down. I think either of them would probably cost less than $6 million. And it's not, do I like either of these options? The question is, would I rather take, a broken down Keenan Allen or broken down Tyler Lockett over the current version of Allen Lazard? And even in their older state, even in their state where they're clearly slowing down, I think the answer to that would be yes, because these are both pretty savvy receivers. Again, these guys know how to run routes. They know how to read coverages. They know how to get to the open spot on the field. All Lazard really knows is how Aaron Rodgers wants him to improvise. So I think like Lazard does have some marginal, not $11 million worth, not half of $11 million worth, not $6 million worth, not $5.5 million worth. There's some marginal value, though, if you have Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback to have Lazard on the team. But of course, Aaron Rodgers is no longer here, so that pretty much eliminates all of Lazard's value. And again, like I'm not talking about young guys with upside. I'm talking about I'm talking about older guys, but guys who still probably give you more than Lazard, and guys who would not preclude you from drafting Ted McMillan if he's there and the best player available when you pick. And I really do think the Jets need to do something to address the wide receiver position because they don't. I think Justin Fields is going to have a tough time with this current crew. Now, during the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to another spot. That's the trenches. I think the Jets could use some help on both the offensive and defensive lines. I see an upside play on offense and a guy who knows Aaron Glenn on defense. And I think these would both be pretty savvy signings for the team. I'll tell you who they are and why they would make sense as we continue here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness might be over, but the NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. You will love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether you're picking your favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals and assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. It was an exciting March Madness this year. I mean, there weren't a ton of upsets, but sometimes that means you have an epic Final Four. I think it's fair to say this was a really exciting Final Four. NBA playoffs is going to be around, and especially that Western Conference. That's going to be a heck of a battle. And if you want to get in on the action again, FanDuel is the place to go. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Again, it's FanDuel.com to claim your $250 in bonus bets. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Tuesday. We're talking about the free agency that was for the New York Jets and the free agency that could still be. We're suggesting some players out there who are still on the market who the Jets could sign. Now, I think there are two aspects of this. One is you don't want to cost yourself any compensatory picks right now because while there will be signings between now and the NFL draft, nobody available right at this point of the year is such an impact player that it's really worth getting worked up about if you lose them. I think you roll the dice that they'll still be available after the compensatory pick formula ends. But I still do think there are signings out there who could help the team. And this is the time of year where you find out how good your front office is, because like anybody could like spend big at the first part of free agency. It's about finding like the lower tier guys. Success is really about figuring out guys who don't really fit in other places, how they could help your team. Now, I think it's fair to say Jets have an issue at right tackle right now, just as they have an issue at the wide receiver position. Right now, if the season began, we talked about it yesterday, Okorafor would be the starting right tackle for this team. And that's just a no-go for the Jets. Okorafor was a guy who was benched after a handful of snaps last year with New England and was benched 2 years ago with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do you really want a right tackle who's been benched 2 straight years? He's got starting experience, which is good, but you don't want him as a starter. There are no great options available in free agency. It's something we talk about a lot. But one other thing we talk about a lot is how sometimes there are late bloomers on the offensive line in the NFL because there's not really great player development in college football right now. So a lot of tackles, guards, and centers come into the league not really knowing how to play. It takes them a couple of years worth of reps to really start to put the pieces together. I mean, if you want to go back 10 years, the Jets signed a guy, James Carpenter, who was a very big disappointment as a first-round pick with the Seattle Seahawks. He ended up being a pretty solid guard for the Jets. And, he was just a guy who needed extra time to kind of put the pieces together. You see it across the league. Mekhi Becton is arguably another example, a guy who, obviously injuries impacted him with the Jets, but after a couple of years in the league and a position change, he was able to put the pieces together this last year with the Philadelphia Eagles. Jedrick Wills was a big disappointment maybe a big disappointment's overstating it, but he was a disappointment with the Cleveland Browns, struggled to stay healthy, but did have stretches of good football. So, it's one thing if a guy goes out there and never really shows any flashes, never really shows that they have the tools to put it together. Jedrick Wills had stretches of really good football. He was inconsistent. He suffered injuries, but there were tools there to be developed. I mean, I think it's fair to say that, he's an upside play. He's probably not going to cost a lot of money because of his injuries, because of his inconsistent play, but a guy with a first-round pedigree. And I understand, like I always say, a first-round pedigree only means so much, but it does mean when you combine it with like when he's looked good, it means that there's some sort of potential bubbling under the surface. And, the Jets only have one first-round pick here. So we just talked about how they need a receiver. We say, well, they should draft Ted McMillan. Well, maybe they want to use their first-round pick on Armand Membu out of Missouri. Maybe that's if they're only going to be able to address at most one of their 2 biggest needs on the offensive side of the ball. So, the one guy I think available at the tackle position who has some degree of upside is Jedrick Wills. I think that he's a guy the Jets should look to pursue. Again, you can wait till after the draft. Wait till that compensatory formula doesn't count anymore, but you can get him for cheap. I think he's worth it. I think he's a guy worth a play. If you don't draft anybody, of course, if you draft somebody at 7, it becomes less essential. But if you end up not drafting a tackle, then that could be the way to go. And the other guy I've got my eye on is on the defensive side of the ball, and it's a guy who actually played for Aaron Glenn last year. It's a veteran, Za'Darius Smith. I think the Jets look okay in some respects on the defensive line, but at least at the defensive end position, they have Jermaine Johnson, but he's coming off an injury. They have Will McDonald, who's coming off a double-digit sack season, but he's not a great run defender. I always believe, though, you need 3 defensive ends, 3 edge rushers. Za'Darius Smith, what you don't love is that he's going to be 33 when the season begins, but he's still a guy who's playing at a pretty high level. He began last year with the Cleveland Browns, then got traded to the Lions, so he has experience playing with Aaron Glenn, had 9 sacks, 10 sacks back in 2022. So, 2 of the last 3 years, he's had at least 9 sacks. He's not really shown much signs of slowing down. he would not have to be like the only guy. If he's your only pass rusher, I think he'd have trouble. I don't think he'd be great at splitting double teams at this point of his career. But if you can keep him in the rotation, you can make him your number three pass rusher off the edge. He's a guy who could help. And I'm also a believer in bringing in guys who have experience in the system, because they can show the players learning the system some of the finer points of it. Maybe it's not as big of a deal on the defensive line, because on the defensive line, your job, no matter what system you're in, is to go out there and perform. You go out there and beat the offensive lineman. But I still think there's value in showing some of the finer points in the system. Again, like, I don't love a guy who's 33 years old. I always prefer to have younger players, but we're talking about like bringing in somebody who could be a number 3 pass rusher off the edge. I think Za'Darius Smith has still shown signs he can play, and he's never been like a spectacular run defender, but he's always been a guy who could at least hold his own against the run. So I think that might be a savvy signing for the Jets to make as we get deeper into free agency. Again, like, I don't want to mess with the compensatory pick formula, but this could be a guy who could make sense for the Jets. If once we get past that point, it was, could be available for a while because of his age. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening, so that you don't miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody, and we'll be back tomorrow. Please send in your mailbag questions. Tomorrow we'll have our weekly mailbag show. Talk to you then.